Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give it a minute or two while the room is getting filled up, and then we'll get ourselves started. So, warm welcome to everyone, though. And we're hoping for a really great conversation today. We encourage lots of engagement, lots of questions, share your thoughts. Yeah. Okay, we'll give it about 2 minutes so everybody can settle, get something to drink, comfortable seat, and get ready to have a very great chat about mental health, the very, very important topic of mental health. A warm welcome to all the people who've just joined in, have been let in the room. Great. It would be lovely, actually, if we could have everybody who's here to please tell us what organization you're from, if you're comfortable to share that, or if you have anything you'd like to share, any thoughts, why this topic is important, why this topic resonated with you. While we're waiting for the room to fill in, let's get ourselves warmed and ready into the flow of communicating and sharing. That's what we're here to do today with our two lovely hosts, Vanishaa and Khosi. So, yeah, I am very excited. Ladies, how are you feeling?
Very excited, actually.
Excited.
Great. I love excitement.
Very
I feel like excitement is the spice to life.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
having a conversation like this in the beginning of the week is a great way to continue the week.
Definitely.
Agree.
Hi, Ash from Waves of Change. Lovely to meet you. Thanks for dropping the emoji. Let's see what else we've got in the chat. Hello, everyone. Divashni from SADAG Empower. Hey, lovely to meet you. What else do we have? We've got Robin. Hey, Robin. Looking forward to this critical fireside conversation. Well, we hope we deliver. We are going to do our best to deliver. Hi, all. Welcome to you all. Michelle from YD Collab. Hey, Michelle. Robin Niemark from Luksha. Hey. Numbuso from Global Base. Lovely to meet you. Hello, everyone. Musella from Sadga. Lovely to meet you. Oh, Musella. Oh, I'm here, Musella. Please forgive me for the mispronunciation, the butchering of your name. My apologies. Hi, Tuliswa from Capacitate. Lovely to meet you. Hi, Lolo. That's our not co-worker, colleague. Lovely to see you there. Thanks for the support. Okay, we have our last minutes. Hi, Zandile from City of Tshwane, listening in from hospital. I won't be able to talk, but I'll engage in the chat. That's the way to do it, okay? So I encourage everybody to engage with us, and we are going to use the chat function as a way of communication today. We're not going to use the mics because it can get a little bit chaotic and a bit discoordinated, but we will be frequently checking the chat. So please keep chatting and writing. Let us know your thoughts. Hi, Ananzi from Amatuba. Hello. Lovely to see so many familiar names and faces. Well, maybe not faces so much, but organizations. Okay, so we're at 2:05, and I don't want us to also lose any time. So we're going to get started. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Zinhle Phakthi. I am the community manager at YD Collab. And today I'll be facilitating this conversation. I will be also leaning in on our audience to help with the conversation. I have a few guiding questions, but I definitely encourage you to also ask your questions. If there's anything that's said that you require more clarification on, please feel free to use the chat. As I said in the beginning, I'll frequently be checking in on that to see how what's being said and what's happening there. Okay. So just to give some background as to why we thought this topic was so important, I think earlier on in the year, we had something called a reflection circle with a few organizations. And in our chats, the topic of mental health was something that really resonated with all the professionals that we were sitting and talking to and reflecting on our roles as YDO professionals, who are constantly serving others, and the balance between the constant outflow and what you put into yourself, right? And how that impacts the mental health. And from that conversation, we really realized that this is a topic that really resonates and needs a lot of unpacking. We can never talk enough about mental health because it's a constant, ongoing thing that impacts not just our professional lives, but also our personal lives. Also, in South Africa, there's been a huge rise of incidences that have happened around mental health and how that impacts the youth, but also how that impacts professionals. So this topic for us is really an important one. And it's something that we find that is of great importance to the community that we seek to serve. So just to tell you a little bit more about what YD CoLab does, fundamentally, we are building a community of practitioners who operate in the youth development space. Our intention is to create support and create networks where, not just ourselves, but every member of the community can tap and lean into resources, can get knowledge transfer, can get support, can get resources so that we can better serve the youth, so that we then can have a larger impact on our society. And that's the short and brief explanation of what YD CoLab is all about. So enough about us. I'd like to introduce our two panelists today, Vanishaa and Khosi. Vanishaa, I'll start with you and I'll ask you to introduce yourself because I always find people say more interesting things about themselves, and you are the expert in who you are. And I think you will communicate well who you are, where you come from, why this topic resonates, and what you're looking forward to sharing with us. Over to you.
Absolutely. I get so nervous to actually introduce myself because I'm always like, what do I say? So I'm Vanishaa Gordhan. I am from SADAG, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. I have been with the group for just about 10 years now. I started off as a volunteer and then I slowly moved into a different position. I was the operations manager till April. I am now studying a registered counselor course just to sort of build more, put more meat onto the information that I share. I have a very soft spot for mental health. I'm always wanting to share information. I'm always finding new coping skills or coping mechanisms to actually help people. And I have a very special interest in university students, medical students, and just sort of, help them sort of influence their mental health, because I always say that the students of today are the future of tomorrow. So that's why I think I have such a soft spot there. I hope that's enough.
That is enough. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Great. And our other co-panelist or guest today, Khosi, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Zianda. Hi, everybody. It's very difficult to actually talk about yourself. I agree, Vanishaa. So difficult. As an HR professional, sounds weird because we sit with people all the time, interview. But yeah, my name is Khosi Radebe. I've got like 20 years experience in the HR people space in various positions within that sphere. Mainly in corporate. You'd be very surprised how I landed at Harambee, which is an NPO. But yeah, I found myself in 2015 with this wonderful organization called Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator. And I think the topic today just resonates with me personally because at the time when I joined, it was a healing space for me. I needed this opportunity for me to heal. And I think the topic today just is going to just like, thread very nicely into what I will share in terms of like tips and tricks in terms of like how we manage this very, very difficult thing in our environments. But yeah, in terms of like who Harambee is, it is a non-profit organization that works with young people that we serve in terms of just like finding and connecting them to first-time employment. So that's the crux of the work. And that work is done by our people. And that is why this topic is very important to me, because we expect our people to show up every day. And how we do that is going to be very important. I think lessons that are going to be learned today is going to be very exciting for you to know about. Thank you, Z.
Great. And Khosi, I mean, of course, we'll only talk about things that are of comfort, but I mean, I would love for us, if you are comfortable, to unpack further down into the conversation about the healing that you're mentioning, because when I think healing, I'm thinking, that might have an impact on your mental health and, so we'll reference some of that to kind of like bring our conversation more to a practical real life experience. So the first question, though, to just kind of get us really kicked off, is I want us to kind of set the foundation and outline what mental health and wellness means to you in the workspace as well, right? So what mental health is as a concept, but also what it means within the workspace. So Vanishaa, I'll start with you because you have that technical background, and if you can just give us like from a technical perspective. Khosi, also if you can just then come through with your technical expertise from a world of work perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. So mental health, I mean, SADAG's been in the mental health field from 1994, and it's many years of sort of building information, finding out what works. I'd just like to highlight here is that our founder, Zinhle, actually did struggle with panic. And for 10 years, she actually didn't get a diagnosis. No one could tell her, like, this is your diagnosis and this is the treatment. And the reason why SADAG started was because she was like, how many more people are struggling? Even though I have all the resources, how many people are struggling with their mental health and don't know this treatment is available? This is what you can do to get yourself, having that better quality life. So I think that's very important to just highlight where SADAG comes from. And mental health includes, and I think it's important to note that mental health includes your emotional, psychological, as well as your social well-being. It influences the way we think, the way we act, the way we behave with others, also the way we speak to ourselves. I think often we don't realize that our mental health is influenced by the way we speak to ourselves. There's something that I heard very recently is that they were saying that, if you're struggling, speak to yourself like how you speak to your best friend. Because often what do we say to ourselves? We often criticize ourselves. Oh, you're not doing a good job. This is not a good day. You're not looking your best. But if your friend is struggling, what would you say? You would say, hey, you're doing awesome. You're doing so brilliant. Look at how far you've come. So I think that's a very important thing that I thought I might add there. And also to realize that mental health is not just a universal student or work environment and change the narrative at school. That is where we change that narrative, because as they grow up, they're going to speak to their friends about mental health. They're going to say, hey, if you're feeling overwhelmed, this is what you can do. I'm doing this. So I think that's just a little bit of me just really putting it forward. Khosi, I'm sure you have tons to add.
No, I agree, and I think for me, you are correct, because it's about the narrative, right? Because for me, I think that how I see mental, health, as you said, is when I actually even shift the wording around. Like when I say, well, like it's like mental. then it sort of like is different, and how it's perceived as well becomes different. And I'll speak about that because it is a great deal in terms of the environment in which we operate within, how it's seen and how it's viewed, because there is stereotypes around mental wellness. There is stereotypes, in the environment that we work with, in the communities that we actually reside in. There's quite a lot. So for me, it is about just taking care of your people. And you said, like, from an HR point of view, and I'll use that terminology, even though in at Harambee we actually use people team and not human resources, because center is people, right? And we really want to remind ourselves as an HR team that the center is the people, is that we need to think about like how we support our people when they actually go through stuff, because it is about showing up every day. It is about how they come in and actually do the work, and how they show up, how they're expected to deliver at the end of the day. And for me, that's shifting in terms of how you view mental wellness, as opposed to how it's actually perceived, is very, very important. And I think my role is to actually shift that narrative. I actually am glad that we've actually come this way as an organization where we are today. Yeah. So thank you. I think I agree with you, Vanishaa, there.
Great. So, I think you both have summed up what mental health is in a really lovely way. And my question is, like, what is the risk then of us not making the changes in narrative, as Vanishaa was saying, right? And not maybe starting the conversations from a younger age. What are the potential risks of not engaging or reframing or not evolving as a society around the concepts of mental health? And of course, this is hypothetical, because, we can't see into the future, but, when we don't address it and we ignore the elephant in the room, what are the risks?
I think, let me take a stab at it, but I think we're going to have a broken society. And for me is, it starts, as you say, now, because the generation is going to sort of like, follow suit, to that. And I'm going to emphasize on how we actually frame things and how we say things. There's power in words. For me, in creating that environment and that culture of just being okay with saying certain things, being okay to approach somebody to say, I'm struggling today. So I'll just throw in a little bit of a tip. So when we start our meetings at Harambee, it has become a culture, and I think it started with COVID, where everybody was just operating, virtually. We now hybrid, where we actually appreciate that people have to interact and come into the office. But at the time, we were operating very virtually. So which meant that online meetings, etc., fatigue. We know this research has showed us that people were just fatigued with technology and also like the work, right? Balancing all of that stuff. And what we actually implemented at the time, which became part of our culture and something that we do without thinking now, is that before we started a meeting, whether on Zoom or MS Teams, we would actually say, let's check in. How are you doing? Right. And then somebody would say, oh, I'm tired. Or, oh, my child didn't sleep at night and I just feel like, and you have no idea on the power of just doing that one little thing, because then you can zone in on something else, right? And you can say, you know what, Vanishaa, in 2 meetings, they've checked in and they haven't been feeling okay. And it's sort of like a nudge for me to say something about it or do something about it. Then it actually calls on me to actually go back and say, hey, Vanishaa, are you okay? And I think that for me, would be actually a starting point to normalize certain conversation. And people have often, like being very open about like very serious, deep issues, deep traumas in our environment, where in some environments, I spoke about where I come from a corporate environment, it's unheard of. People don't have time for that. Like they don't have time for that. And I've seen how in our environment, people have been very vulnerable and open. And I think that also is built from trust, right? And I'm not saying it's going to be a very quick solution, because you do have to put some investment into that kind of a culture and be very intentional about it. So yeah, it's going to be changing of mindset, language, behaviors. Then it would actually shape the kind of culture that you want. And that kind of culture, and I've often said, even with our values at Harambee, organizational values, some of our people have often said, like, I actually even take those values into my personal context, right? When I go home, when I discipline my children. So it becomes a, like at a macro
ripple
level,
effect.
That is exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I love what you go on, Vanishaa.
No, exactly that. I think that's just that ripple effect, right? So having that conversation and bringing it home or taking it to work, it's almost that it's the change of narrative in the bigger scheme of things. And I think just the one person that you might tell that I'm overwhelmed or I'm stressed, that will help actually, and I always say this with SADAG, it was in COVID space. When you mentioned the COVID space, I was like, oh my goodness, it just came back to me. We had those WhatsApp groups where we were all sharing information and sharing TED Talks and sharing these cute little, pictures around self-care or check-ins. And I love the mental health check-in. I'm not even going to lie. That is like my like pride and joy. Every single presentation, every time I talk about mental health, it's that check-in. It takes less than a minute to just say, how are you feeling right now? I mean, even in this space here, it's like there might be people that are watching us, but what are they thinking? What is taking up their headspace? Are they thinking about when the load shedding is? Are they thinking about what they're going to make for their kids or supper later? I think being this sort of mental health check-in actually brings you to the present. It brings you to like now, what am I listening to? What am I doing? How am I feeling in this moment? And that has a lot of power. You're absolutely right. It has so much power. I think just to answer your question, Zinhle, is that I was thinking awareness is so important, right? Being aware of what are the warning signs, being aware of how am I feeling right now? And that's where the mental health check-in comes in, right? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling like, I can't focus. But what are we going to do about it? A lot of the times when we were within the COVID space, a lot of the talks that we did to students or even in general to other NPOs, I started off with stress, right? Because we're talking depression, we're talking anxiety, we're talking mental health. Yes, of course. But we can't all relate to that. What we can relate to is overwhelm and stress. How stressed are we, right? And where on that stress spectrum are we? How are we coping with that? Because if we say that, oh, I'm stressed, but what are you doing about it? Are you taking time out, even if it's 3 or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, even if it's just going to sit outside? And I always tell people, you can do something mindfully. When they say, oh, you must practice mindfulness, right? You can make a cup of tea mindfully. Literally make a cup of tea mindfully, and that might be enough for you to go back to your computer and say, hey, I can tackle this now, because you've had a change, like in your frame of mind, you've had a change. So I'm absolutely so excited about that. I think everything Khosi said it's just on par with everything I was thinking about. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies. So I love and I resonate with what you're saying, but I also know that in the workspace and in the world in general, we have different personality types, right? And what you guys have shared, the premise of that is that everybody can articulate how they feel or even have the comfort and self-awareness enough to be able to share that across with you. But I think people who suffer the most or who are most impacted by mental health are those people who don't have the language, who don't have the awareness, who don't have the skill set, who are maybe stuck in a very conservative, conformist kind of reality where they are unable to express in a check-in, like, how are you feeling today? And really, genuinely, they don't have the language or the comfort, or maybe even sometimes it's the confidence to feel comfortable in the share, right? Because especially when you're working across the different age ranges of employees, we all have different lived experiences and realities. So when we're addressing mental health for those type of people who aren't as empowered as others maybe, how do we go about changing the narrative for them in a way that they can engage with or start learning or unlearning, really, is probably what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big question. It's absolutely a big question. And I think a lot of people do struggle with that. I mean, you might have a loved one or you might have a colleague that actually you're noticing their behavior has changed. Maybe they're isolating themselves. Maybe they're not like interacting with the other people at the office as much as they used to. So we can build that awareness. And I think one of the things that we always say is if you notice any of these things, right, we have the awareness. So now we know, right? If you notice a loved one or a colleague, it's about asking them, it's about not being afraid to actually just have that conversation, but also knowing, and I always say this as it's a huge disclaimer, you don't have to fix it. There are spaces like SADAG that you can sit with your colleague or your loved one and say, let's phone in, let's speak to a counselor, let's, know that it's confidential, know that you don't have to give your name, know that you can be completely anonymous and you can share your experience. And sometimes that does help. And you will get a person that if you say, hey, Mary, you know what, I've noticed that you haven't been feeling well, you haven't been sleeping well, you're looking a bit tired. There might be that person that says, hey, I'm all right, I'm perfectly okay. But you can actually come from that space, and I always say this, is that you come from that space of complete non-judgment and complete support. And they will almost see that underlining. All you have to say is like, okay, that's fine. Maybe right now you don't want to speak, but here's a number that you can call. It's toll free in your private space. You can phone in or you can come to me when you are ready. Just know that I'm here. And I think a lot of people who are struggling, often are very grateful for another person noticing they're not doing their best
Very
self,
true.
because they often can't tell it to themselves. They often can't say, hey, I'm not feeling so great. But if someone notices, they'll be like, oh my goodness, I am actually not feeling well. And I think that's almost
it's that confirmation, right?
Yeah.
Exactly that. Exactly.
Yeah. That it's not just happening in your head. You're not being dramatic. You're not being overly emotional. It is happening and people are seeing your aura or your behaviors changing. And almost it makes you feel connected, I assume. I've always felt that way. When someone has been able to say, hey, I think you're going through something. It feels like, oh, okay, I'm not in this on my own. I do exist. I am valid. And I think, yeah, it is being brave enough to say, here's something that could help. Khosi, Khosi, from your side, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think for me, and I'm hearing what you're saying because it's a genuine question, right? Where there are no structures, and how do you start the conversation where, like a big organization that's got like an EAP, which is an employee assistant provider, where you can tap into. And I think for me, I mean, how actually everything from an engagement point of view falls into place in the environment, it's just purely, and I keep on emphasizing on culture. Culture is based on your values as an organization. So what are your values first, starting point, right? Does everybody align to your values? How it's a shared common language that you all feel like you align to. Whether it's about the core work that you do, it's about people, it's about anything that you do. There's a shared and common language and purpose that you all align to. That's very important, because everything else that you start doing and implementing would almost like feed for underpinned by a statement, which we call it the Harambee way of working. And that says it's not what we do, it's how we do it, right? So for me, the how is on the everyday. It's about how I show up at work, how I perform. It's about how I talk to my colleague, how I speak to my colleague, how I treat others that I interact with. It's the how. Right? You can be very good at what you do, but the how is very important, right? And even when we always say, it's very tricky for us because we hire for culture and we hire for technical abilities, and one can outweigh the other. It's a very difficult match because you have to be intentional about your people. You have to be intentional about the people that you bring into your space who will actually interact and promote this culture. They have to align and understand the connectedness and actually what we are trying to do and what we are trying to solve. So just moving to that in terms of like your question is that once you've actually got that in place, then you can actually then bed that down in the everyday practices, like people practices. Whether, as I said, like, Vanishaa and I made very practical, simple example, doesn't cost a cent, in terms of how you can start conversations when you have a one-on-one, how you can actually start a meeting, just tapping into the personal aspect of a human being. Like, we have a language also in our environment that says, show up as yourself. Show up as yourself. Like, you have to be authentic and genuine, when you show up. And that actually creates trust, because people tend to trust what you say. It's not about what you say, and also see behaviors, how you role model, and all of that stuff. So if they see the role modeling in meetings, it's easy for somebody to say, you know what, I can actually trust Khosi. I can actually go to Khosi and have that conversation to say I am struggling. And it's not going to be a very difficult thing. So create those environments. And for me, it's also encouraging. When you say it, encourage people to be vulnerable. You have to actually say it's okay to be vulnerable, and you can actually be vulnerable even in the workplace. What people shy away from, or professionals in the work environment, is that we shy away from mental well-being because we feel like we don't have the time, we don't have the capacity, and we don't have the resources. And I think for me, that's a huge danger that costs companies a lot of money, because you will lose people either by, dismissal because you don't care. You're just going to go straight into the performance stuff and not know about the actual what's going on underneath the person on the surface. Or you're going to lose money because you have to hire all the time and get new people to actually learn your environment and understand your environment, etc. It's an expensive thing. And I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. There's some people that just don't, cut it in the end, but you've exhausted all means. And people turn around 360. I've seen this. People outperform. They become champions of your organization in terms of your values and what you drive, because they've seen it with themselves, how you actually take care of them. And those are like simple things that if you don't have any structures currently that you can start implementing, empowering managers to have the right conversations. As I said, how you start a meeting, how you start a conversation, how you pick up the sons, but also be mindful in terms of like creating barriers. Like, there's certain things that managers are not experts at, and I think we need to be mindful of that as well. What do we actually give them in terms of like the threshold of which they can handle? And I always say, know your people. Khosi cannot be now a very bad performer yesterday, when yesterday she was the star of the moment for 5 consecutive years, and tomorrow is like I'm not performing to the standard and I'm taken to a disciplinary hearing. Clearly something is not right. Clearly, for a manager, they need to understand what is wrong, what is behind that, and start understanding. So
ask the
like
difficult questions.
Exact difficult questions, and being human. Like, let's be
Absolutely.
the care aspect is missing in the workplace, because we're driving targets. We can still drive that. Harambee is the high performance driven environment that is highly agile. We always say, like, it takes, I don't know what, to actually work in that environment. We move very quickly. We are high performance environment. At the same time, we actually take along our care and our values along the way. We're not dropping anything along the way. It's equally important. And I think once you actually resolve that, it has to take investment. It has to be intentional. And it will all fall into place.
So I think I loved when you said the vulnerable, and like and we always say this at SADAG, it's like investing in your mental health. Because if you invest in your mental health, even if it's taking out that 10 minutes a day, right, at the end or in the beginning, investing in your mental health actually helps you live a better quality life. So you're increasing the quality just by investing that little bit. And like exactly when you said that you don't have the time to look after your mental health, or you don't have the capacity, or it's an afterthought. I think it should be that, that even if it's a 5 minute, when you have your checklist, I mean, we all have phones now. Everybody has everything on their phones. I'm a huge writer, so I have tons of lists. But on your phone, put an alarm for 5 minutes, whether it be before bed, whether it be in the morning, whether it be in the afternoon, to say, hey, I'm checking in with myself, or hey, I'm just sort of like sitting outside or reading something or taking a moment to listen to some music, and that can be your investment. So I think I love when you said, being vulnerable and, having that time for mental health.
Precisely.
I mean, and because what I'm gathering from that, from both of you, is almost a culture of, in the work context, it is having buy-in from the very top that says the culture is this, and then living it and breathing it and ensuring and safeguarding it so that it can do what it needs to do. But then taking that same cadence from the top and having it cascade all the way down into your own personal life, right? So like, at work, we all have KPIs, and when they come from the top, you're constantly checking in on them, right? It's having the same pattern when it comes to yourself, when you're either outside of the work environment, applying the same rules that you do in your professional performance into your personal performance. Because as we say, mental health, it doesn't just occur in the workspace, it happens also in your personal spaces as well. And many of us who are working in this space are professionals, but some of us are parents as well. Some of us are community leaders, and people look to us. And if we become the custodians of what mental health needs to be and be the example of it without putting any additional pressure on ourselves, but the constant honest conversations, arriving as ourselves in our truth as we are right now, it does help. So yes, Khosi?
No. I was actually saying, so it when you spoke about things that cascade from the top, like it's exactly what I'm saying, because when you have people that lead by example within the organization, everything falls into place again, and I'm going to use that word. So let me give you an example. So for us, one of the tools or mediums that we use to communicate important updates at work, it's actually fun and funky because there's music in between and everything. It's not like your normal Zoom meeting that you'll have. We call it Radio Harambee. We do have like actual presenters. It's actually produced by our own people, our own.
I've actually attended one of these. Yes.
Yes.
It is quite cool.
Very exciting, very engaging. But it's actually used critically for like work stuff. Like when we will be introducing new work, interviewing our partners and stuff like that. Wellness also can feature depending on what we actually want to drive as part of the strategies from a wellness point of view. And then we have like whether a speaker coming through, engaging with our teams, we can have master classes as well. Do you know that Radio Harambee, which happens, like we host it every Tuesdays for an hour, and Fridays, our CEO literally like 1 minute before 8 o'clock, she's there every single day, logs in with everyone else. Everybody's expected to be on Radio Harambee every day during that time slot. And for me, that's like that says a lot, because it's driven by whatever you say as an organization. If you're not living it, people are not seeing the lived experience, it becomes futile. And I think that's just something I just wanted to add on.
You're
what you were
so right. You absolutely are so right. And I'm thinking so much about SADAG and how the office works, where everybody gets involved in activities, whether it's wellness days, whether it's mental health awareness day, whether it's suicide prevention day. It's about everybody coming together, whether they're having a Facebook Friday conversation and all the counselors are joining and actually asking questions, and it's a lot of that, I think, that builds that sense of community. And I think so much so is that every single person wants to be part of a community. I think it's an African sort of, narrative. And I want to use that word. It's an African narrative that we all want to be part of this community. And I think if we have a community where we're sharing the awareness, we're sharing the warning signs, we're sharing information, even if it's the small bits of information, right? That small tip that might work for you. I think that's where it comes from. That's how you can change that narrative and have that new, like you mentioned, that culture of, open, safe spaces where if a person is feeling overwhelmed, they can actually share that, or just say, I'm overwhelmed today. I think I need a moment. And I think that's where that comes from. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's great. I'm learning so much here. It's not even funny.
I'm learning too.
I'm going to also go into our chat room now. And please, everybody, if you've got questions or if you would like the conversation to go in a specific direction, please do as Robin has just done. She's just dropped a comment in the chat, and she's saying, have we established or defined what a healthy, whole human mindset looks like? At a basic or granular level, do we understand what building blocks make up a healthy, whole human? How does this shared benchmark help us and the youth gauge when we are not in peak mental condition?
I think it's different for every single person. Every one of us knows, and I always give this example, right, is that stress might drive some people or it might limit some people. So, for example, you get an assignment, right? You get an assignment on the 1st of the month, they give it to you, and it's due at the end of the month. You'll have those people that will actually do it within the first 2 days. So by the 2nd, they're done. Yet you'll get other people that need the stress before, the 30th of the month to say, I need that pressure to actually give out that work or produce that work. So I think it's important to know that each and every one of us are different. We each are absolutely unique. And in addition to that, some of us breathing works. Some of us mindfulness works, some of us going to yoga works, some of us gym works, but for some of us, none of it works. So what we have to do is say that, okay, there's so many different coping skills, there's so many different practical coping skills or coping mechanisms that, I think is an important word to use because it is a mechanism, is that we can try the different ones. Never think that if Mary is doing this and it's working for her and now it's not working for me, that now that's the end. No, try something else. And I think that's the important thing to remember, is that we each are going to manage our stress differently. We each are going to manage our mental wellness differently. And each of us are actually going to manage those stress factors differently. So find out what works for you, even if it takes you a few weeks. Some people love journaling. Some people can't sit down with a pen and paper and say, hey, I'm going to journal. They just sit there. So use your phone, use different things.
So, I just think, in summary, are you saying then the definition of a healthy, whole human mindset looks like individual preference? And today, even as an individual who I am today, in 6 months from now, a different coping mechanism could be more suitable, but it's more the mindset of wanting to be constantly aware of yourself and how you're feeling and checking in with yourself. That maintenance. So it's more of the habitual pattern than it is necessarily like a textbook definition. It's a set of actions. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think it's valuable to know that. I'm so sorry.
No, go.
No,
I think it's valuable to know that each and every one of us are different, right? And we're unique. Not every one of us look the same. We're not the same height. We're not going to use the same stuff in our hair. We're all going to be different. And I think that's where we need to, come to that point that, okay, fine. We need to tap into what works for us. And if we have to do that by putting an alarm on your phone for 5 times a day and saying, I'm doing a mental health check-in, and then maybe in that, alarm or in that sort of date on your calendar, you actually say, I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling overwhelmed. And you go at the end of the week and you go have a look at what you were feeling at different times of the day. You might be saying, okay, maybe on a Monday afternoon, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need to take a 20-minute break, or I need to do something else to refresh. Only when you're aware, and I cannot stress this enough, is that only when you're aware of how you're feeling in that moment, will you also know, what can I do about it? Even if it means going for therapy, seeing a counselor, calling into SADAG and speaking to a counselor just to maybe vent. That might be all you need in that moment as well. So I think that's also valuable.
And I think for me, if I look in the work context, is that it's about self, as you say, being aware, self-aware, but also other people around you. I always say, you are your brothers or sisters keeper, because you have to have people around your environment who would know that, something is not right. And I'm going to go back to that, because it's the simple things. If I'm not engaged and I don't show up the way I normally show up, and I made an example of 5 consecutive years I'm performing, and one day I'm just not showing up the way I should, and I'm not engaging the way I should. Clearly something is not right. That should give the people that I work with signal that, something is not right. And I think that's just the same, going to the basics of just checking in and just understanding where everybody's at, and tapping into that. But also, I think, if I were to just bring examples of how we've actually seen this as well, because you're quite right. It's there's individual set of things that you can see, what you can actually pick up very easily in a one-on-one context, or individual context. But then organizationally, it becomes very difficult when you have us 400 plus employees. Become very difficult, right? So what we do is that we actually are mindful, the first part, that people may not be going through. I mean, we know, we hear on the news, we see it on the media, that mental wellness and the the struggles that people are going through, especially post-COVID, that it's a thing, right? And for us, we're also mindful of our environment, that our people, live within that context. And what we do is that we actually and this is something that we've done even pre-COVID, where we actually did the talent engagement survey twice a year, where our employee give us we actually select different themes. Wellness is part of it, and then they give us honest feedback. It's highly anonymous. Nobody knows who said what. What we want is the richness of the information that we get out of it. Then we take out what comes out consistently and through. I mean, last year, towards the end of the year, people are feeling extremely fatigued, and it burnt out, and that was a theme that was coming through, whether in meetings burnout, but this burnout was coming through a lot, and we wanted to understand where that's coming from, and we actually built programs around that, right? So it's having to be intentional also, but you're just not asking the question for the sake of asking, because this is where people don't trust the people processes, is that you just ask these surveys and never-ending surveys, but actually nothing's done about it. So you have to be intentional about the measures that you put in place and programs to ensure that they're closing the gap that you want it to be closed. Another thing is that we have a group of individuals, we call them change champions, who actually listen on the ground, and they come back, they're culture champions. They actually come back and say to us, hey, people are just they feel this is it, that people are tired. There's just something in the air. We always call it the smell of the place, the smell of the place, right? And then they also hybrid working as well, in terms of it has brought, as I said, post-COVID, a lot of stress, and people, human nature is that we like to connect, we like interacting. It's just human nature. And I think COVID has taken that away. It has created also a lot of stress and tension and pressure and all of those things, and balancing work, work-life balance and deliverables at the same time. The lines become blurred of what are the working hours and then what are my times, all of that stuff. And for us, we've actually said, okay, we'll take a moment in terms of pausing, where everybody comes into the office every quarter. We call it homecoming week, where the whole week everybody comes into the office and we interact. It's fun. This is where we actually do our wellness days, because then we have full capacity. People can actually go through that stuff. We also are intentional about what we are driving in terms of programs. If we want to reiterate certain messaging from a wellness point of view, we actually do that. So that's a space, because that's also something that people feel we were feeling we're hearing a lot. People are missing. Don't take away our hybrid working, but at the same time, we actually still want to to interact with. So it's about listening and knowing what people want. And as I said, it is intentional. It is an investment. You have to see it like that. You shouldn't see it there's a cost element to it all the time. Yes, there's going to be, but then the result, the return on investment on that is going to be greater than what you're actually spending. If you've got an opportunity to have an EAP provider, even if it's testing it out for a period of time, seeing how far it goes, because as I said, some of these things become very, very difficult to manage. No manager can actually get involved in some of these things that we've had in our environment. And I think for me, like when you hear feedback also from somebody who comes to you recently, somebody, even though they've resigned because they felt like they needed time out in terms of like what they were going through in their mental wellness journey, they actually said like just the time, thoughtfulness, the care, the whole organization has shown towards what she was going through was very much appreciated. And I think that you can't just buy something like that.
No.
You can't something that, so it's for me, it's just like rewarding, even for the work that I do. Like when I see somebody at the end benefiting from that, it's something else.
And you can't put a price on that. You can't put a price on that.
No, you can't.
You really can't.
So I want us to reflect, but as I'm going to do like a little bit of a summary of some of the strategies and suggestions that I've heard in the conversation. I really would love for our audience members to also share their strategies. I mean, I think all organizations are very interested and committed in understanding and arriving better on the topic of mental health. And I always believe like it takes a village, and I would love to hear from the village what strategies in your organizations. And I understand that not all organizations are, as large and as well staffed as Harambee and SADAG, Empower. Some organizations are smaller. I mean, I think in those smaller organizations, there's still some really powerful learnings on how are you guys navigating mental health, and what strategies are you implementing currently in your organizations. Robin, I hope in the response that you got to your questions, you're happy with it. I did ask in the chat if you were good with it. Please let us know. I've been making notes. Okay, I'm going to read your comments. Please, can the comments keep rolling in around the strategies? But just to summarize what I've heard, and also please also share what you've heard so far in our conversation. But from a work perspective, I've learned that leadership at the top needs to really buy into culture, building a culture of mental health awareness and commitment and investment into building an environment and a culture where people are able to share and arrive as their authentic self and they're supported. Another thing I've learned also is be brave enough to find out, to ask the difficult questions, to do the surveys, actually do the surveys, and let's review what people are saying, and to be listening constantly, because as you say, in large organizations, it's difficult to know each individual person and understand what they're going through, but there are means in this technological world. Surveys are really powerful and probing into the insights and the data that you get, and then building solutions based on what you've heard, and then going back to your employees and asking them, hey, is this approach working, and constantly opening the lines of communication for within the work environment. And then on a personal level, Vanishaa, what I've heard from you is really trying to manage your own personal journey, being accountable to yourself. It's okay, don't worry. We're very used to it. It's the international technical glitches that must happen everywhere around the world. We saw them happen.
And the children walking.
Yep, I was waiting for something like this. It's always great because then again, we are human, right? We don't live in these perfect little archetypes.
Bring yourself to work, your whole
as
self.
You are. Yes, but what I've heard is check in with yourself, apply or create certain rituals, and also do the same thing that you would do at work. How you arrive for work, arrive in that way for yourself. For work, when you're working on a project, there's a reporting period. You need to be gathering data. You're going to need to do some reflection in order to come in for the next section or the next quarter as your best self. So whether it's setting a 5-minute reminder, I really loved that analogy of, the 5, just write the emotion that you're feeling. And I can just imagine already those data points, like you start to see a pattern, like Mondays I'm extremely depressed, but at this time I'm that. And then you can start solving. Once you've identified within yourself what your patterns are, you can then start looking for solutions, but you cannot solve for something that you're not aware of, right? But also
Absolutely.
another thing is having circles around you where people are aware and asking questions. So far, these are the strategies that I've pinned down for myself. And I'm hoping more people in the chat have said some stuff. No, people are not. And I see people are leaving. Don't leave. I know we're asking hard questions. It is a safe space. But
Only
yeah.
5 minutes more. I
For
think I
sure.
want to add just a little bit to that, is that I'm obviously going to send Zinhle the presentation that I've created for this, just a small little one with a lot of coping skills. And on that presentation is the mental health on the spectrum sheet. It's one of my favorite slides ever. I will not lie. I use it myself. So it's not just that I'm sharing it, it's practicing what I'm preaching. I have it printed on my desk. And what happens is that when you say, like, when you're putting those little notes on your phone as to how I'm feeling in that moment, we talk about sleep, right? And we haven't touched on that yet. So I thought, let me just bring it in, because sleep is a huge factor, right? We didn't realize how the lack of sleep can influence our mental health. There was actually research done, or stat that one of our board members shared, to say that if you don't sleep your full 8 hours, the next day you might be driving with the capacity of a person that actually had 2 or 3 beers, or have drank alcohol the day before. And that's actually not what we want to do, right? Because that means it's poor concentration. It means that we're not focused. It means that we cannot be our full selves, and we actually can't have that high quality of life that we're wanting to. So I think it's so important to also navigate your sleep. If you notice that you're always tired or always exhausted, it's something that I promise you, because I'm such an advocate for it, because I was such a bad sleeper, is that check in with yourself. Notice how many hours a night you're sleeping. Check it on a calendar, write it down, because often what will happen is we think that, oh, Monday we didn't sleep well, it's fine, we'll sleep well on Tuesday. Tuesday we don't sleep well, like, you know what, we'll sleep well on the weekend, or we'll sleep well the next day. And what happens is, when we haven't checked in or wrote it down, by the end of the week, we have had no good night's sleep. And that's why we're so exhausted. That's why we're fatigued. And that impacts our mental health. I just wanted to add that, because it's such an important factor. I think we didn't realize influences your mental health in such a big way. And it's such a simple thing. Sorry.
Great. I think one of the feedbacks that we've also gotten is breathing techniques are also helpful. So as strategies, getting out into nature and exercising, so physical activity. Also, Michelle shared that new research is also looking into the bad impact of processed foods and poor nutrition on brain health and mental health, which I think is very true.
Missing meals,
yeah.
actually. Feeling more stressful, having a lot of coffee. That's, I'm not practicing on a preaching. I like coffee.
In moderation, all things in moderation are great.
Absolutely.
So Zinhle, I see your comment also here. It says, Bertha, I love that I'm Bertha. I hope that you're referring to me. I'm assuming that that's me. Bertha, I like what you just said, but it was too quick. Do you mind resharing? So the conversation at this point, I'm not sure which part you'd like me to reshare. I would happily reshare, but thankfully we have recorded this session. So Zinhle, you will have access to it for sure before the end of the week. But if there is something you'd like me to elaborate on, please just give me a little bit more direction on what it is I had said, and I can okay. So she said, okay, great. Love that. Also, please share your thoughts. I mean, I also, there's Robin who said, I've been making notes, and I think we still need to distinguish between the means and the end. Various psych literature gives a universally accepted definition of a healthy mind, or the desired state of a desired state of mental health. The examples we've heard are great explorations as a means to the end for a healthy mind. Okay. Great. Oh, we've got one more message. Okay, so Michelle's just giving me a prompt. We will be sharing all our resources on our website, which will be relaunched in October. So all the recordings, even from the previous reflection circle, which has led us to this conversation, all of that information will be available on our website. Lolo or Michelle, if you'd like to just drop the website address so that everybody has it, it'll be the same for everybody. Okay, so it is 3 o'clock actually. I was about to ask more questions, but time flies when you're having fun, as they say. But if there are any last thoughts, audience, Khosi, Vanishaa, any last ways and strategies or support documents that you would like to share, please drop it in the chat.
Oh, will do.
There's a lot. Wow.
Yeah.
Great. It's great. Everybody should copy that and paste it into your WhatsApp, because I'm sure you all have your WhatsApp on your computer. I'm sure.
I think for me, just my parting words would be just like start small, practice certain behaviors, and you'll see gradually things will start happening automatically, and that also becomes something that spills over to other people, because somebody sees it being done to them. They also have a tendency to sort of replicate and do the same thing. Please try to practice best practices that we've shared here that would not cost any cent, but just would make sure that you actually take a moment and pause every time that you are engaging with someone who you think may be in need at that point in time, because you don't know. That's why everybody says, make sure that you actually display care every time, because you don't know who needs it at that point in time. You may be speaking to somebody who desperately needs that care at that point in time, and you don't even know. It may go a long way. So for me, it starts with like how are you doing? And genuinely, it's like, how are you doing? And not just in a human nature, how are you doing? And like, here you go. When I'm about to say and you gone. Like nobody takes to actually, how are you doing? And looking at me in the eye and actually really caring and understanding what I'm feeling. Thank you.
Absolutely. You took the words out of my mouth. Absolutely. Without a doubt. And you said it so beautifully. I'm definitely going to, I hope I get this recording so I can just replay all of that. It's beautiful. What I'd like to add is, I think just one very interesting thing is that and I know a lot of people watch Netflix, I think it's so important to consciously notice what we're watching and what we're actually putting in or absorbing into our system. On Netflix, there is a program called Headspace. I know there's an app called Headspace where it's mindfulness and it's meditation, but there is now a Netflix series, guys. And if you're spending some evening saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to watch Netflix this weekend, put that on your list. Watch it with your family. It's so beautiful. It's guided meditation, and it's something that you can watch, something that you like, and also helpful. So just that's all I have to say. I think it's very useful. I'm full of all of these different things that you do, just because I also have tried so many different things to help me manage. COVID was a very difficult time for a lot of people, but at SADAG, what our main focus is just to help all of those people that were reaching out to us. And I think we had to also incorporate a lot of those different skills to help us manage ourselves as well. So I think that's just something I want to share. And I hope that everybody's taken at least one thing out of this talk.
Ladies, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. And I think my parting words, seeing as we're all giving parting words, is to understand awareness. Once you understand what it is, and you can find the language to express what it is you're experiencing in your mental health state or in that state, I think then you can start finding solutions. But you have to first get yourself to awareness, and it might be that you need to open yourself up to new experiences. And as Vanishaa was saying, Netflix, and find alternate sources that can help you navigate what feels good for you. You'll know what feels good for you. It'll feel natural. And also, we are constantly changing. So today I'm mentally strong. Tomorrow I may not be, and that's okay. We are evolving human beings all the time, and give ourselves grace. So with that being said, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to having you at our next chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.